You come to my house on the day my daughter is to be married and ask me to murder for money?
Ah, that little farce you played with my sister. You think that would fool a Corleone?
You think too much of me, kid. I'm not that clever.
He's still alive? They hit him with 5 shots and he's still alive?
Leave the gun, take the cannoli. The Godfather is one of my favorite movies, and I've always watched it ever since I was little, and that quote has always stuck in my mind.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
We all seem to have a favorite line from The Godfather stuck in our head.
When it first appeared 50 years ago, co-creators Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola were two ambitious men with deep ties to Long Island, determined to transform a B-level Hollywood gangster movie about New York wise guys into an epic tale about capitalism, corruption, and the Italian-American immigrant experience.
We decided to take a look at these two Long Islanders and how their experiences here influenced so much of this classic film.
It's got a lot of impact. It still does. It doesn't matter how many times I see this film.
Hofstra film expert Rodney Hill says there are many local roots to The Godfather, the Oscar-winning movie now celebrating its 50th anniversary. Much of this fictional story takes place in Long Beach, the home of mob boss Vito Corleone, and many real-life actors in the film, like Al Pacino, come from the New York area. Hill says one Long Island connection to The Godfather can be found here at Hofstra's Playhouse, where director Francis Ford Coppola got his start.
This is the stage where Mr. Coppola did his first work as a director.
A decade before he put together The Godfather, Coppola was a student overseeing Hofstra's theater productions in Hempstead.
He would be up, back there in the rafters, adjusting the lighting and everything. We're directing the student productions, and he thought, well, I can do that.
Until then, Coppola, who comes from a highly successful family, wasn't sure what he was going to do.
If I ever had a school and if I ever had a moment in the sun, it was at Hofstra. And that's where I first had any sense of any kind of self-esteem, or that I could do anything, or that I had some gift that could be shared with others. And up until that time, I was just a low-achieving kid who flunked algebra.
It's here in Merrick in Nassau County that Mario Puzo first had the idea for his novel, The Godfather. At the time, he was living in this house with his wife, 5 kids, and working a full-time job.
Biographer M.J. Moore says Puzo was hoping his book about the powerful Corleone family might get his own family out of debt.
At that time, Mario's life was a pressure cooker. He was a heavy smoker with the big 8-inch Monte Cristo cigars. And God knows he loved to eat. And he was simply not in good health as we now think of it, but he was a workhorse.
These experts say Puzo and Coppola, who shared credit on the script, relied on their Long Island backgrounds in turning the Godfather novel into a film.
Right away, there's this mention of Long Island and the association of the family with Long Island. So the Long Island setting of the wedding really is a kind of sanctuary away from the violence of the crime family.
The Godfather begins here at a big family wedding at the Corleone residence in Long Beach, Long Island. Actually, though, the scene itself was filmed at this house in Staten Island.
In the film, the home's fortress-like wall is manned by armed tough guys and seems symbolic of the Corleone family itself. It was also ideal for the joyous wedding of the Godfather's daughter, a scene which takes place as Don Corleone, played by Marlon Brando, is inside tending to mob business.
That's where you see the Godfather go in. And
Carol O'Reilly, who lives across the street, remembers all the excitement here 50 years ago.
Did you ever peer over and see Marlon Brando?
You never peered over. That was not in the, right? So you'll see when I show you the wall is this high.
Part of the Hollywood magic involved using these large plastic strips to make the stone wall around the Corleone mansion seem even bigger. O'Reilly kept one in a garage as a memento.
Even though it's plastic, it is done so beautifully that it looks like it's part of the compound, and that part of the compound goes all the way around so that there's no peeking over, there's nothing happening that they don't want to happen.
The Godfather filmmakers also built a stone gate in the middle of the street where other scenes were filmed.
So this was the compound. I mean, it was gated off.
For O'Reilly, the most memorable scene was when the Godfather's traitorous son-in-law, Carlo, was strangled in a car as it passed through the family's front gate.
He gets in the car. Now the gates are there, and they open it up, and that's when the guy behind him, or maybe even before that, I don't remember that, but that's where it happened. And when he kicked through, yeah. So that was all right here. If you looked at all of the different angles and things they were doing, they probably did it 20 times. You have to die perfectly. It has to be just right.
Other key scenes were filmed at Falaise in Sands Point, the former North Shore home of Newsday's founders, Alicia Patterson, and her husband, Harry Guggenheim.
This is the former living room at Falaise, and they turned it into the dining room.
You may recognize that room in this cut, where a Hollywood producer refuses to put a mob-connected singer into an upcoming movie. Later, in an unforgettable scene, the producer wakes up in bed with the decapitated head of his prize racehorse. Back in the 1950s, Guggenheim's real-life thoroughbred Dark Star won the Kentucky Derby. Parts of the horse sequence was shot in the old Guggenheim horse stable, now run by the Sands Point Preserve Conservancy.
It was such an old-time barn, and it had the look of what they were trying to do.
Conservancy project manager Joseph Cesarelli has a story or two about the filming, including how Coppola chose the horse head used as a prop.
Mr. Coppola didn't like the prop head that they came up with, and so they actually went to one of the slaughterhouses, found a horse that was similar in looks to Khartoum, and Mr. Coppola said, okay, when you slaughter that horse, I want the head.
The Godfather contains other scenes filmed around New York. Some, like Radio City Music Hall and Calvary Cemetery in Queens, are still there 50 years later. Some no longer exist, like the Long Island toll booth where the Godfather's oldest son was killed. The church where the Long Island baptism scene was filmed later burned down and had to be rebuilt. But the collaboration of Puzo and Coppola is best on display in the memorable restaurant scene. That's when the Godfather's youngest son, Michael, after a long, tense moment, shoots another gangster and a crooked cop.
This Bronx restaurant is now closed, but arguably it was the most important scene in The Godfather.
Its importance is reflected in Coppola's detailed notebook, translating Puzo's novel into a script. Coppola called this his prompt book, an old trick he learned at Hofstra.
Clearly, Coppola identified this as a really dramatically key scene from the novel, and it would be one of the central scenes of the film.
The partnership between Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola won them an Oscar and inspired other Godfather sequels. But the films also triggered some soul-searching about how they portrayed Italian Americans.
A man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
Godfrey Palea manages this patch-out theater. As a teenager, he watched The Godfather being filmed in his Brooklyn neighborhood. Though still one of his favorites, he's aware of stereotypes that include minorities and the role of women.
There are several negative stereotypes about Italian Americans, is that they are, shirtless, wife-beater wearing, non-intellectuals, let's say.
I come from an Italian neighborhood. In terms of a woman, there is a lot of stereotypes in there. It is a product of the time that we came from.
I think that film itself is a wonderful representation of where we were back then and where we are now, and I think that we can still look at a movie like The Godfather and look at it as a historical work.
With money from his book's success, Mario Puzo moved his family to this home in Bayshore, where he wrote other novels and screenplays. He died in 1999. Coppola, who now lives in California, went on to write and direct many other films. In the Hofstra archives, there's an extensive collection devoted to the school's famous alumnus, tracing his path from student director to The Godfather.
I think The Godfather is remembered, is known as one of the great epic American films, just one of the masterpieces of American cinema.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
That sense of family, that sense of respect for their Italian-American heritage, I think that definitely connects Coppola and Puzo.